Hi, Rolf Snobeck here. Thanks for joining me again this week. So we've talked about different roof moisture survey techniques in the past, and I've had a couple people call and ask me if I could get into the nuts and bolts of how the different technologies work. A couple weeks ago we covered nuclear roof moisture surveys. Today we're going to talk about infrared and get in a little bit about how that technology works. So as we've discussed, none of the three primary survey methodologies actually measure water directly, but rather an attribute of water. And with infrared, what we're looking for is temperature differences in the roof. In simplest terms, areas that are warmer are suspect to have trapped moisture, and those that are cool are suspected to be dry. We find that out by doing the scan and then doing verification. So the principle basically is this. During the day, the roof absorbs the heat of the sun on a nice sunny day, and due to thermal gain, the entire roof gets warm. After sunset, the areas that have dry insulation reject the heat fairly quickly, and the areas that have wet insulation retain the heat. They're a better heat sink than dry insulation. So the theory is after sunset, and this is a term that experienced thermographers use when they're doing roof moisture surveys, is they wait for the window to open. What does that mean? When the dry areas have cooled off so that you can see the wet areas. There's normally some forensic work done up front before the scan is done at night. The roof is typically investigated, and you identify where there's active leaks in the building. You probably take some cores ahead of time to find a known wet area and a known dry area, so that when you're up there after sunset scanning, you can see if the camera is able to differentiate between the wet and the dry for that window to have opened. There's a lot of bad surveys that have been done in the past where somebody goes up immediately after sunset and they say the whole roof's glowing, it's all wet. Not really. It could be, but more often than not, the window hasn't opened. So there's two methodologies at play. Transmission, which I would call winter grade, and emission, which I'd call summer grade. Let's start with summer. The principle being that you have wet insulation, and it's that better heat sink. After the dry areas have cooled off, the retained heat is emitted from the wet insulation, and that's what the camera sees. Waiting for that window to open could be, if sunsets at 9 o'clock in the summer, the window could open at 10 o'clock, 11, 12, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. When I used to do these for a living for 17 years, there was many times where the window may not open till 1 in the morning, and we'd be out there scanning when the sun's coming up. So not a lot of fun. The other method is transmission. This is more done in the winter. Typically the sun's down at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, but the difference is in the winter, the building's being heated. And it could be 75 or 80 degrees at the ceiling, and it could be 20 degrees outside in a northern climate, so you have a huge temperature differential. And what happens then is that hot air, the heat, is transmitted through the wet insulation, and you can see that almost immediately after sunset. So not a lot of fun walking around on a roof in the dark on a cold day. The difference is that the scan can begin almost immediately after sunset, and you get through it pretty quickly. So those are the two methods. Typically this is what the camera sees. If there's an area that's wet, once that window opens, it really pops and you can see it very well. And you can see a line here. This is the same area where the person using the infrared camera tells the person with the paint can where to mark out the roof, so that there's a record of where there's trapped moisture in the roof. So that in a nutshell is how the principle of an infrared survey works. We'll get into some of the finer attributes in future weeks. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Would enjoy speaking with you. And don't forget to follow me here on LinkedIn or subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you, and have a great day.